Alright, yet another seemingly soulless remake has been made, and this time it's of Point Break. Well, I have to admit, it could have been a lot worse, I believe. Alright, as you would imagine, Point Break is a remake of Point Break. Now, I hadn't seen the original until I saw it the night before I saw the remake, and I have to say, having seen the original for the first time this year, and not having the nostalgic feelings that people might have from seeing it originally and then seeing it before the remake, I have to say the original was a pretty good action film. In fact, if I were to rate it now, the original would probably be about a 4-star or maybe a 4.25-star movie in my opinion. As for the remake, not nearly as good as the original, that's for sure. So it does share some similarities to the original, of course, because it is a remake. In this one, instead of Johnny Utah being an agent, going undercover with these surfers and trying to find out who the dead president's bank robbers are, this time he's an extreme athlete that had a tragic event that caused him to not want to be an extreme athlete anymore, and instead he becomes an FBI agent and then gets put into this mess of finding these criminals that are obviously extreme athletes. So of course he goes undercover and tries to find out the identities and who's doing these crimes, and he gets involved with them and starts liking them and yada yada yada. Now let me get this out of the way first. I thought the original was a really great movie, and I don't mind some of the modernizations of the remake. I don't think they're as good as the original, but I do at least feel that it should be applauded that they tried to go their own route and they stuck to their guns. The movie ultimately tries to go epic. It tries to do a bunch of large-scale things, bunch of multiple different sort of set pieces where they use extreme athlete stunts in them. And sometimes the environment and the whole scale of everything is pretty epic and honestly pleasing to the eye. At least everything looked good and felt epic, except for the rock avalanche scene. The rock slide scene was a little too over the top and too just awful looking in my opinion. The rest of the stunts handled really well. But the remake of Point Break is one of those remakes that tries to make it bigger and better, tries to be visually stunning, and does a pretty good job at some of that and some of the action sequences, but overall the story and the soul of the film just really isn't there. Now don't get me wrong, there's little hints of a soul, little hints of character development, but not enough to actually make you feel, okay, I like these characters, I'm going with these characters, and I care about the story, at least for me. I thought a lot of the stunts and a lot of the things were visually stunning. I thought that the parachute scene where they free all the money, the scene where they're gliding through the air, as well as the rock climbing sequence towards the very end of the movie, I thought all of them were really great, especially the surfing scene that is hinted at in the trailer. But I feel the story and the characters were really lacking in this film. Acting-wise, there's nothing special, nothing completely awful, just sort of bland. I thought the actor that played Bodhi was the best of everyone else, and he wasn't too great, but he had a likability quality to him. He had this zen sort of thing that Patrick Swayze brought to the character back in 1991. He's still no Patrick Swayze, but I felt that his acting brought more justice to the character than anyone else in the film. I like that the film at least tried to give some character development and some sort of tragic backstory to our main hero. And I like that the story used it to its advantage to try to get Bodhi from actually using it to try to connect with our main hero. This is what I'm talking about when the film has hints of character development, hints of good ideas, but it's just little hints that just don't develop in the way you would want them. Now, having seen the original just before I saw the remake, I have a lot of appreciation for how the story was handled. In the original, it was more of a mystery on who the bad guys were. Sure, you pretty much predicted it's going to be Patrick Swayze's character because they're using so much time to develop him and the relationship with him and Keanu Reeves. But in the original, they didn't really have a hint on who the bad guys, who these bank robbers are. They just know that they're surfers. So there's a bit of a twist, and it makes a little bit more sense in the original why Keanu Reeves falls for these group of characters and starts liking them, because he doesn't think they're the bad guys. He thinks that this other group are bad guys when it turns out, yeah, this other group are bad guys, but they're more drug dealers and not the sort of bank robbers that he expected. And so the relationships feel a little bit more natural in the original. In this one, they pretty much know who the bad guys are. It's not a big mystery. And in this remake, most of them are actually cold and not welcoming to our main character other than Bodhi. In the original, all of them were welcoming, all of them were inviting, all of them were just chill and really cool dudes. This one, they're more like your stereotypical bad guys, except for Bodhi. Sure, they eventually take him under their wing, but it takes a long time for them to do so. Plus, in the original, I enjoyed that whole aspect where Keanu Reeves' character isn't a surfer, and so he's learning how to surf as he's going along and as he's bonding with these people. And it makes the love interest in the first one all that more substantial. Because the love interest in the original is the girl that ends up teaching him how to surf. In this one, there is a love interest, but it's just... there really isn't much to it. She's first introduced when they dive underwater together, her and the main character. Then there's like stretches, this long stretch where she's not shown ever again. Then she just sort of pops up here and there, not having any sort of connection with our main character. And then there's this expositional scene where she explains a little bit about Bodhi's past. And somehow that makes them love each other more, and it's really awkward. It's one of those things that's clearly meant to be substantial because something happens towards the end of the movie, but there's nothing really there to connect the characters and make it feel legit. I like the sort of 8 trials that these characters have to go through in order to try to achieve nirvana and try to have this more zen feel that the original had with the surfers. And it gives a sort of excuse for the main hero to start liking and start appreciating what they're doing. But at the same time, they're really not as big of criminals as the original people, because during these 8 trials, there's only 3 times, or 3 or 4 times where they commit a crime, and only 3 of them are shown. The rest of these trials, they're not even committing crimes, they're just having fun and doing these trials. In the original, they were robbing banks just to keep their surfing lifestyle, and I thought that was a little bit better because it showed that they have flaws and shows that they are bad guys. But before that, you get to like the characters before you know they're bad guys. In this one, they have to have some sort of excuse for you to like the characters, but it's not enough for me. Overall, I feel Point Break is a pretty bad remake to a pretty awesome action film. Visually, it is stunning, and it has a few moments where it does feel like it's paying true homage to the original, while other times it feels like they're trying to take what was good in the original and just feel like they're obligated to do some of the same things. Like, there's some things that are thrown in this remake where it feels like, okay, well, it was in the original, so we have to have it in this one, which is like the love interest that just seems thrown in there and not developed. They have Pappas in this, which he doesn't feel like he's a character or much of an influence in the whole overall movie as he is in the original. In this one, he's just sort of some guy that takes him from place to place and every so often talks to our main hero. And the worst part of the remake for Point Break for me is the final scene. Not the final scene, but the scene where, you know, if you see the original, Eventually Keanu Reeves gets to Patrick Swayze, and there's this huge storm with all this water and these waves, and there's this really nice scene at the end. Well, they felt like, okay, we have to have a scene like that in our remake, and it just feels thrown in there. It could have ended at Angel Falls and it would have been completely fine, but no, then they throw in this extra scene just to play homage to the original, and it just looks really bad and feels like it's just obligated to be in it. Like they felt obligated to put it in. And I do kind of find it funny that most of the deaths in this movie are either falling off a cliff or getting shot. Actually, every single death in this movie, either they get shot or they fall off a cliff. That is it. So I think this movie is competently made. It has a few flaws in the story, obviously. The characters aren't as developed as the original and are lacking and are pretty bland. And so overall it is a bad remake, but I don't think it's a so horrible movie that I would consider it one of the worst movies of 2015. I would consider it a very forgettable movie, but I can understand some people ultimately liking it if they've never seen the original before. So I'm going to give the remake of Point Break 2 stars. It's still better than Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse and better than Hitman 47, but it's still not that much better. So, did you see the remake of Point Break? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If not, what is the worst action remake movie you have ever seen? And as always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.